It's not every show that gets a presidential endorsement. Mr. Biden, tell us what you think about the Brad and John show.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
It could have been worse. He might have tried to bite Brad on the knee. Now it's back to Brad and John on the BJ show.
Then, as of this moment, double secret probation.
Yes, double secret probation. Okay, John.
Yeah, hey, anything from Animal House or Airplane is generally our intellectual fodder on the show.
Shows our level of sophistication.
It does.
I've never done this before. I'm officially a pastor. I'm going to say a prayer. Pastor Brad is going to say a prayer. Dear God, please help those people who have been upset by what happened in the election. Find peace. Find the fact that tomorrow will be another day. Today will be another day. And life will go on. Their life will get better. Things will improve. And we will move on down the road. And we will appreciate the fact of the things we have and not necessarily desire the things we don't have. How is that, John?
That's fantastic. And I would just add, as it was in the beginning, is now and ever shall be. I can't give away the whole thing because you got to go to godsquad.cloud to hear that. If you want to hear some inspirational music, now what I love when I hear promos for godsquad.cloud, when I'm listening to Westplex 1071, is that the teaser by by Pastor Brad. He points out the fact that the music will help you not only feel good, but also be prosperous. Now, to me, that sounds a little multi-level marketing, but I'm not one to judge, Brad.
John, I have to tell you, who I was turned on to that by was Shelley Barr. That Shelley Barr.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Shelley Barr once upon a time said to me, you know, when we were talking about various churches, and she says, well, that's a prosperity church. I go, a prosperity church? And she says, yeah, prosperity church. I go, what the hell is that? This is probably 8-9 years ago. And she says, well, there are churches there that actually preach the fact that you should become prosperous and you should make a lot of money. And I'm going,
that's right, which is true, right?
Right. Well, and it's interesting because of the fact, and she pointed out, she says, Kurt Warner's church is a prosperity church, the family church.
Yeah, St. Louis Family Church.
St. Louis Family Church is a prosperity church. And they teach the fact that if you are a good Christian and you do the right things and you help out your fellow Christians, that you will become wealthy both spiritually and actual hard cash wealthy. I mean, I can remember a friend of mine telling me the story. He's a family church member, that the pastor got up there, and this was like this time of the year, and the pastor got up there near the end of the sermon and said, hey, look, I just a little business to take care of. We're trying to find a new snowplow because they have their own building, they own their own place out there. If you know, it's on between what is that? Between Edison and they have the whole area there between.
Yeah, that whole area right by Long Road.
Yeah, but they hold the entire area. You can go into the front entrance or the back entrance. You can come in off of Chesterfield Airport Road, Edison. Okay. And they got a lot of parking lot there. And the pastor said something about, hey, we want to just mention that anybody might have a used snowplow. Our truck's getting in bad shape, and we've had a company take a look at it, and they say it's probably going to take a lot of money to repair, and it's not going to be necessarily worth the repairing. So if anybody can maybe help us out, if you got an old snowplow or something like that, maybe we can take a look at it. We can purchase, get in touch with the church office. Next Sunday, pastor gets up there and at end of business, where they're closing down some business, essentially say, we want to thank one of our members in the church who bought us a brand new Ford truck and a brand new snowplow. Once again.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the idea, right? Is that if you're prosperous, you can help more people.
Right. The idea being is, and it's just like you hear about these people talk about, well, these rich people that own all the companies, that they're terrible people. And the rebuttal to that is, how many times have you been hired for a job by somebody who was broke?
Hey, you know what, Brad, to quote the legendary philosopher Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z, in his song Moment of Clarity, he says, I can't help the poor if I'm one of them, so I got rich and gave back. To me, that's the win-win.
Give me that again one more time.
He said, I can't help the poor if I'm one of them, so I got rich and gave back. To me, that's the win-win.
But see, isn't that ultimately, and once again, Pastor Brad again, I'm not great at Bible verse and all that stuff. I can't quote all these different things like somebody like Chris Highfield can. can. I have a basic understanding of religion. My basic understanding of religion is really simple. You treat people the way you want to be treated. You help people out. When you see someone in need, you don't do be John Combest. You call 911. You try to help those people out.
You beat me to it, Brad.
you pick up your phone, you dial 911.
You don't answer the door when somebody comes trying to sell you some vinyl siding.
Right. Many times I have sat on, and this is not kidding, many times I have sat on my front porch with the Mormon kids the young guys who are driving around, the neighborhood with their ties and their white shirts on and their bicycles, and I've had wonderful discussions with them. One time I sat on my front porch for probably an hour and a half and had a discussion with these guys. That to me is someone who is not, and I think I told you this crazy weird story that years ago, and I don't know if he's still alive anymore or not, but I used to work the morning shift on Sunday mornings, the old KSLQ, and I came in at 9 o'clock, and the guy before me was Pastor Ron Simmons. At the time, he had the Abundant Life Church. It was right there on 270. It's something else now, but it's that church. It's got sort of an interesting round thing as you're going south on 270. It's off on the right before you get to J.J. Kelly in Manchester. And I learned so much from him. I used to go in early on Sunday morning, just sit with him for like an hour. He was still on the air playing his music and preaching on the radio and that kind of stuff. And then I'd go on the air at 9 o'clock doing regular programming. And he taught me so many crazy things. He taught me something I've used, I don't know how many times, the 3 Gs. I've told you what the 3 Gs are, right?
Oh, yeah. Go through them again, Brad. Because you haven't talked about this since it's been like a year, I think.
Okay. There was this church, a 270 in Dorset. Matter of fact, you're going south in 270. It was right on the right there. And it ultimately became the Maryland Heights Community Center. It's gone now because they tore down the old place and they built the new community center. But way back in the day, there was like an equipment shed. It was like a farm field right there. And it was an equipment shed. And this guy, young guy, started his own church, and he called it the sheep shed. The idea being that the people who are congregates are the sheep, and they go to the shed. So it's a sheep shed. He was very charismatic, and the church grew and grew and grew. Got to the point where he built a building. They added on to the building, and that was the old Maryland Heights Community Center. And I used to see it all the time, and there were tons of cars in the parking lot. It got to be sort of a news item because there were so many people. The parking lot was overflowed, and there's a residential neighborhood around there. People were parking in the residential streets, going to the sheep shed, and people were complaining, "Hey, parked in my front of my driveway, I can't get my car out," stuff like that. Okay, all of a sudden, I noticed one day, nobody was at the sheep shed anymore. You go by there on Sunday, hardly anybody there. They used to have a big deal on Wednesday night, hardly anybody there. And I said something to Ron Simmons one morning. I'm sitting in the studio with him Sunday morning. He's on the air, and I'm saying, "Hey, Ron, what happened to the sheep shed?" And he looks at me and says, "Brad, that's an interesting story." I go, "Well, I'm all ears." He starts out by telling me that once upon a time, when he was in divinity school, that one of the classes they took was the essentially religious ethics class. And he said they had a very learned professor who was a man of the cloth himself, and he was talking the ethics of being a pastor and the right and the wrong things to do. And he started talking about the 3 Gs. And he warned each and every of these new pastors that they had to be very aware of what the 3 Gs could happen. The first G is glory. If you all of a sudden, or not necessarily all of a sudden, but let's say you're a brand new pastor and you start a church or you take over another church and not doing so well, and you give good sermons and people start, "Oh my God, Pastor so-and-so so good." People start coming, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And pretty soon it gets to the point where when the collection plate, that's the first G. The first G is glory. You get the fight, "Oh my God, I'm preaching the gospel and these people love me. I feel glorious." The second G is gold, because when you start getting the big congregation and they like what you're doing, they put more money in the collection plate and they write checks to the church, and they tithe, and maybe they give donations to the church. Maybe they give, like this guy did with Family Church, they give a brand new truck with a snowplow on it, okay? That's the second G. And he's telling me, says that's what happened to Sheep Shed. He started this small congregation, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And pretty soon he had the G, he had the first G, which was glory. And then he had all this money coming in because everybody was giving him money through the collection and donations. And he had the second G. And the third G is gals. And I went, "Gals?" And he says, "Yes, because what happens is when that pastor gets the first 2 Gs, he gets the glory and he gets the gold, he becomes very attractive to women. And women flock to him, pardon the pun. And women shouldn't be flocking to him. And he should be pushing those women away, but he doesn't. And that's the third G. Now,
I'm just, not to interrupt you, Brad, but I'm watching along on our Patreon, and Tammy Faye Baker just unsubscribed.
So the interesting thing about that is, go back in history, look at Tammy, Jim and Tammy Faye. Look at, who's the other, there were a bunch of them. Who was the guy, I used to watch him on Sunday morning. I used to watch all the Sunday guys. I used to watch, I think Creflo Dollar got in trouble on this. Do you know who Creflo Dollar is?
No, I don't know who that is.
Oh, yeah,
he sounds like that was Richie Rich's dog.
No, it was this pastor out of Atlanta. And who's the Jimmy Swaggart? Jimmy Swaggart was another one.
Jimmy Swaggart, yeah.
Right. And once again, one of the things that Shelley and I had fun with all the time, where we'd play the I need to put it over in this system where they go, I want to be in a long metal tube with a bunch of heathens. That's what's his face. That's what's his name? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I can't think of his name right now.
And once again, I look at and it's interesting because going back to the Ron Simmons thing, he said that you don't necessarily have to get the third G, which is gals. He says sometimes the pastors and the men of the cloth get 2 Gs and they become unreasonable and they become detached from their church, and they become to the point where they become to the point where you don't recognize them anymore. Now, I will tell you right now, I know somebody like that. I do. And I hate to say that, but I have a personal relationship with this person. And Shelley and I have discussed this before. Shelley knows him too. And I'm going like, I'm worried about this guy. I am. Because we've seen him change. And we've seen him change to the point where, I'm going like, man, already it's impacted him. And once again, I get it. If you're some kid who's playing, sandlot baseball, and you progress, and you progress through you play college ball, and then you get drafted, and then you go to college, and you go into the major leagues, or you in the minors, and you work your way up from rookie ball to AAA to from A to AA to AAA, then to the majors. You're not the same person anymore because of the fact that your head gets to be big. 9 times out of 10 that happens. I say that's what's happened. Matter of fact, remember, I told you this stupid story. One of my very first program directors used to always say, don't let your show get too big for the room. The idea being is most radio stations are small little studios, and the idea being is if your show gets so big that it outgrows the room, there's something wrong. And look at Howard Stern. You and I have talked about Stern.
He's a great example.
He's just lost it. What he hated is now what he is. He is the man. He is the guy who, well, don't do this, don't do that. You wear your mask. Matter of fact, wear 4 masks. Wear 10 masks. You go back 30 years ago, if we had had COVID 30 years ago, do you think Howard Stern would be telling you to wear a mask? Hell no. He
turned into Don Imus. And I think this is a good time to thank Shelley Barr for the Prosperous line, because she has effectively and inadvertently hijacked the entire C block today, Brad.
Who's that?
Now, Brad, you're really good at buying stuff on Facebook Marketplace. I just got a message, even though I'm not a big Facebook guy, I got a message from a guy that says he's from a church in Chesterfield. He wants to trade a snowplow for one of my spare girlfriends. Do you think that does that sound reputable? Like, do you think there's anybody at a West County church with a spare snowplow? And I'm trying to get rid of like spare girlfriends before holidays. They always expect gifts and they want you to come by for a while in the daytime. Do you think that's a good trade, or do you think I should pass on the snowplow?
John, what? First off, I'm not the Facebook Marketplace guy. That's Shelley Barr. Shelley Barr is the Facebook Marketplace queen.
This is the Shelley Barr block of the Brad and John show.
Yeah, maybe that is. I don't know, John. I mean, John, you kid about this all the time. But, once again, for those of you, and let's end the show this way. Pastor Brad will come back on. I feel your pain. I know you're hurting. But you know what? You have to move on because of the fact that we have this great country called the United States. It's very resilient. We've been through revolutionary wars, which put us into business. We've been through the War of 1812. We've been through the Civil War. We've been through World War I. We've been through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan. We've had political things where we've had meltdowns happen. We had the situation with Richard Nixon, where he was caught, involved in a crazy weird thing of the Watergate thing. the country moves on because we have to stay resilient. We have to be the people that when we get kicked in the teeth, we go to the dentist, we have a couple bridges put back in, and we get back out there and keep doing our job. I gave the example that on September 12th, we should have had a day of mourning. September 12th, 2001, we should have a day of mourning. September 13th, we go back to business. We put the planes back in the air, and we dust ourselves off, move on down the road, and say, you know what? We're Americans. We can get past this. And that's what I'm saying right now. For those of you who are still freaked out about, Orange Man being the president, you know what? It could be worse because you know what? It could be Vladimir Putin being our president, and then we'd all be screwed. You know what I'm saying?
Or Zelensky.
Zelensky
would want a bigger salary, and he would only wear T-shirts.
Or it could be Nancy Pelosi, and then we'd all really be screwed, right?
Yeah, and then, I don't know, somebody'd break into our house with a hammer.
Say goodbye, John.
Bye, Brad.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?